With its iconic dun-dun sound, Law and Order revolutionized the crime drama, painting a gritty, realistic picture of justice in New York City. It was the show that felt grounded, stable, and eternal. But for the actors who walked those gray streets, the line between life and death was all too thin. Behind the badge and the gavel, the cast endured heart-wrenching struggles that no scriptwriter could invent. We are uncovering the sorrowful tales of the detectives and attorneys who are no longer with us, actors who brought justice to the screen but faced cruel injustices in their own health and lives. This is the somber requiem for the fallen stars of the Law and Order universe, whose real-life endings were far more tragic than any case they ever prosecuted. Jerry Orbach flashed the badge in 1991 as Detective Lenny Briscoe when he was 56 years old, the weary soul of New York City, whose wisecracks masked a decade-long death sentence, endured in total silence. Before becoming the face of the franchise, Orbach was a Broadway legend, yet he traded the stage for the steady paycheck of a procedural, starting with a salary estimated at $35,000 per episode. By the time of his departure, his indispensability commanded over $100,000 per episode, allowing him to amass a net worth of $10 million. However, the tragedy of Jerry Orbach was a private war fought in the makeup chair. Diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer in 1994, just as his character was becoming an icon, he hid the illness from the cast and crew for 10 years. He underwent hormone therapy and radiation between takes, refusing to let the pain break his performance. He died on December 28, 2004, at the age of 69, passing away just months after filming his final scenes, a trooper who worked until his body literally collapsed. Fun fact, Orbach requested that his eyes be donated after his death, and 2 weeks after he passed, 2 blind New Yorkers received his corneas, meaning the eyes that saw so much on screen gave sight to others in reality. Briscoe was irreplaceable, but the show had to go on. To fill the void of a legend, the producers hired a man who didn't need a script to know how to arrest a criminal, because he had spent 2 decades doing it for real on the bloody streets of Chicago. Dennis Farina stepped into the void in 2004 as Detective Joe Fontana when he was 60 years old, the only actor who didn't need to research the role because he had lived the nightmare for 18 years as a real police officer. Farina was a unique Hollywood creature, a former Chicago burglary detective discovered by Michael Mann. To replace Orbach, he was paid a handsome salary estimated at $75,000 per episode, a figure that reflected his movie star status from films like Snatch. Despite his authentic swagger and a net worth of $5 million, Farina faced a backlash from fans who refused to accept a new face. His tenure was cut short not by ratings, but by a sudden, devastating biological failure. On July 22, 2013, Farina died abruptly from a pulmonary embolism at the age of 69, the exact same age at which his predecessor, Orbach, had died. It was a shocking, swift end for a man who had survived shootouts and street gangs in real life, only to be taken down by a blood clot while alone in his Arizona home. Fun fact, Farina still carried his real-life police pistol on set sometimes, and famously refused to use the prop handcuffs, preferring his own personal pair that had arrested actual felons in Chicago. Farina brought the swagger of the streets, but the original squad featured a sergeant who brought the soul of the opera. Our next subject was a man of immense physical stature who left the show not for money, but to save the one thing he loved more than acting. Paul Sorvino carried the weight of the precinct in 1991 as Sergeant Phil Carrera when he was 52 years old, a gentle giant whose abrupt departure was not a contract dispute, but a desperate bid to save the vocal instrument he valued more than his fame. Sorvino was a classically trained opera singer who took the role of Tireta for the financial stability, earning a standard lead salary of approximately $25,000 per episode in the early seasons. However, the grueling schedule and the artificial smoke used on set to create atmosphere began to damage his bronchial tubes, threatening his ability to sing. He walked away from a hit show to preserve his voice, a risky move that paid off artistically, but cost him millions in potential residuals. He died on July 25, 2022 at the age of 83 from natural causes, leaving behind a net worth of $10 million and a legacy of artistic integrity. Fun fact, Sorvino was also a sculptor of bronze statues, and despite playing tough guys, he was so sensitive that he reportedly cried for an hour after filming the scene where his character gets shot, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment. Sorvino left the precinct to save his voice, but the courtroom required a voice that could command a nation. Next is a man who blurred the line between fiction and reality, a sitting U.S. senator who played a district attorney while hiding a heartbreak that no political power could fix. Fred Thompson took the high seat in 2002 as D.A. Arthur Branch when he was 60 years old, a titan of politics who commanded the screen with a southern drawl, masking the devastating grief of a father who had buried his own child. Thompson was a rarity, a real-life Watergate attorney and U.S. senator acting in a TV show during congressional recesses. His salary was substantial, estimated at $75,000 per episode, contributing to a net worth of $8 million, yet his imposing demeanor hit a crushing blow. In 2002, the very year he joined the show, his daughter Betsy died from an accidental overdose of prescription drugs. Thompson worked through the unimaginable pain of losing a child while playing a man of justice, a stoicism that was both admirable and heartbreaking. He died on November 3, 2015, at the age of 73 from a recurrence of lymphoma, a disease he had battled privately for years. Fun fact, Thompson is the only actor in history to be a regular cast member on a TV series, while simultaneously serving as a sitting member of the United States Senate, a conflict of interest that only his immense charisma could smooth over. Thompson represented the power of the state, but the defense table was often occupied by a man who fought quiet battles. Our next subject was the ultimate that guy actor, a face you know from 100 movies who wrote his own final chapter before the sun could take him away. James Rebhorn stood for the defense in 1992 as Charles Garnett when he was 44 years old, the omnipresent face of Hollywood authority who fought a 22-year war against the sun, acting through a diagnosis that hung over him like a gavel. Rebhorn was the industry's most reliable character actor, appearing in Scent of a Woman and Independence Day. For his recurring legal roles on Law & Order, he earned the standard guest fee of roughly $3,000 to $5,000 per week, a modest sum for a man who worked constantly to build a $2 million estate for his family. His tragedy was a slow-motion execution. Diagnosed with melanoma in 1992, he fought the skin cancer for over 2 decades. He died on March 21, 2014 at the age of 65, working until he could no longer stand. In a final act of agency, he wrote his own obituary, a touching letter to his family and fans that was published after his death, apologizing for leaving the party too early. Fun fact, Rebhorn was so committed to his craft that even while dying, he insisted on fulfilling his theater commitments, performing on stage with a back brace and pain medication, because he believed the audience deserved a show. Rebhorn fought the law, but our next subject sat above it. She was a diminutive woman who found massive fame late in life as a dystopian hero, but on this show, she was the judge who watched the tragedy unfold from the bench. Lynn Cohen ascended to the bench in 1993 as Judge Elizabeth Meisner when she was 60 years old. A late-blooming matriarch of the New York stage whose journey to stardom was a grueling marathon of poverty that ended in global fame only in her final years. Cohen was the definition of perseverance. For decades, she was a respected but struggling theater actress, earning the meager off-Broadway weekly minimums of roughly $400 to $600, often barely scraping by in a city that demands a fortune. When she appeared on Law & Order, her pay was the standard Screen Actors Guild day player rate of approximately $500, a humble sum for a woman who would later become a pop culture icon as Magda in Sex and the City and Mags in The Hunger Games. Despite eventually accumulating a net worth of $3 million, her wealth arrived only after she had spent a lifetime worrying about rent. Her tragedy was not a sudden crash, but the decades of silent, grinding anonymity she endured, watching younger, less talented actors rise while she waited for the world to notice her face. She passed away on February 14, 2020, at the age of 86, from natural causes, finally resting after a career that proved success has no expiration date, though it often charges a heavy tax in time. Fun fact, Cohen was so dedicated to the realism of her craft that she famously refused to wear hearing aids in her daily life, despite needing them, fearing they would make her rely on technology rather than her other senses during performances. Cohen finally found her spotlight in her 60s, but the courtroom saw many faces that were staples of the system. Next is an actor who played the game from the other side of the aisle, a man whose sharp wit on screen hid a devastating medical secret he took to his grave. Ned Eisenberg approached the bench in 1997 as defense attorney James Granick when he was 40 years old, the sharp-tongued legal shark whose recurring presence anchored the franchise while he fought a terrifying private war against a rare and aggressive killer. Eisenberg was the ultimate New York character actor, possessing a face that screamed street smarts. For his recurring roles, he played multiple characters in the L&O universe. He commanded a respectable guest star fee in the range of $5,000 to $8,000 per episode, building a steady career that resulted in a net worth of roughly $4 million. However, the confidence he projected as the lawyer who could outsmart Jack McCoy masked a heartbreaking vulnerability. Eisenberg was diagnosed with cholangiocarcinoma and ocular melanoma, two rare forms of cancer. He chose to keep his diagnosis a complete secret from the public and his colleagues, to keep working, acting through chemotherapy and surgeries without a word of complaint. He died on February 27, 2022 at the age of 65, shocking the industry that had relied on his energy for decades. He worked until the very end, refusing to be looked at with pity. Fun fact, Eisenberg was a master of sleight-of-hand magic, a skill he often used to entertain bored cast members during the long hours of waiting on set between takes. Eisenberg played the gritty street lawyer, but the show also featured the aristocracy of the legal world. Our next subject was a Tony Award winner who brought elegance to the defense table, living a life of quiet dignity that concealed a love story forbidden by the times. George Grizzard adjusted his tie in 1992 as defense attorney Arthur Gold when he was 64 years old, a gentleman of the Broadway stage whose polished exterior as a high-priced lawyer hid the struggle of living as a gay man in an era that demanded silence. Grizzard was theater royalty, originating the role of Nick in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Yet on television, he was often the villainous defender of the wealthy. His prestige allowed him to negotiate a premium guest star fee estimated at $10,000 per episode, a significant sum for a recurring character. Despite a successful career and a net worth of $2 million, Grizzard lived with the constant pressure of the open secret. He lived with his partner William Tynan for 40 years, but they were only able to legally marry just before Grizzard's death, a lifelong commitment forced into the shadows. He died on October 2, 2007, at the age of 79 from complications of lung cancer, a disease he battled with the same quiet grace he brought to his roles. He passed away holding the hand of the man he had loved for decades, finally validated by the law he had pretended to practice on screen. Fun fact, Grizzard was so respected that he won a Tony Award in 1996 for A Delicate Balance, a full 37 years after his first nomination, proving that his talent endured long after his peers had retired. Grizzard represented the elite defense, but the judge's bench was occupied by a woman who tolerated no nonsense. Next is the actress with the most distinct voice in New York, a woman whose commanding gavel on screen silenced a room but who couldn't silence the march of time. Doris Balak slammed the gavel in 1990 as Judge Margaret Barry when she was 64 years old. The formidable matriarch of the court whose acerbic wit and gravelly voice became the gold standard for authority, masking a heart that beat for only one man for over half a century. Balak was a pioneer of television, appearing in the very first soap operas, yet for her iconic role as the no-nonsense judge, she was paid the standard recurring scale of approximately $3,500 per episode. While her face was famous, her voice was her fortune. She earned millions over her lifetime doing voiceovers for major campaigns, accumulating a net worth of $5 million. Her life was a rare Hollywood love story. She was married to producer Philip Rose for 65 years, a partnership that defied industry odds. However, the end came swiftly. She died on October 4, 2011 at the age of 85 from natural causes, passing away just 4 months after her beloved husband. It was a classic case of broken heart syndrome. The judge who could command any courtroom simply could not navigate a world without her partner. Fun fact: Balak is immortalized in pop culture not just as a judge but as the producer in the movie Tootsie, who memorably fires Dustin Hoffman, delivering the line about Russian dressing that film students still quote today. Judge Barry was a force of nature, but our next judge carried a name that was heavy with literary history. She was a woman of immense talent who spent her entire life in the shadow of her brother, the greatest playwright of the 20th century. Joan Copeland presided over the court in 1991 as Judge Rebecca Stein when she was 69 years old, a Broadway veteran who fought for her own identity while carrying the burden of being Arthur Miller's younger sister, a relationship that opened doors but cast a long, suffocating shadow. Copeland was a trailblazer in her own right, one of the first members of the Actors Studio, yet her television roles, including her stint on Law & Order, paid the standard guest fee of around $3,000 per week. She was often referred to in the press as Miller's sister, rather than by her own accomplishments, a professional slight that stung for decades. Despite this, she worked tirelessly until her late 90s, amassing a net worth of $4 million through sheer longevity. She outlived her famous brother and almost all her contemporaries, dying in her sleep on January 4, 2022, at the staggering age of 99. She was the last survivor of a golden era of American theater, a woman who finally stepped out of the shadow only when there was no one left to cast it. Fun fact: Copeland made her Broadway debut in 1948 in a play written by her brother, but she famously refused to let him pull strings for her afterward, insisting on auditioning for every subsequent role to prove she wasn't just a nepotism hire. Copeland sat on the bench for years, but the New York judicial system is vast. Our next subject was another veteran of the gavel, a quintessential New York face who played the judge in countless scenes, representing the old guard of the legal system before fading into the history books. Merwin Goldsmith took the bench in 1991 as Judge Stanley Golub when he was 54 years old, a quintessential New York face who presided over the city's fictional moral decay while battling the quiet indignity of being a working cog in a billion-dollar machine. Goldsmith was the definition of the old guard character actor, a man whose weary eyes and sharp delivery grounded the legal theatrics of Law & Order in reality. Despite appearing in over a dozen episodes and becoming a fixture of the franchise, his compensation was strictly by the book. He earned the standard Screen Actors Guild daily rate, which in the early 90s hovered around $500, capping out at perhaps $3,000 for a full week's work. While the franchise generated hundreds of millions in syndication, Goldsmith saw only the residuals of a day player, accumulating a modest net worth of approximately $1 million over 50 years. His tragedy was not spectacular, but rather the slow, inevitable fading of a craftsman in an industry that prizes youth and novelty. He worked steadily until his body gave out, passing away on January 21, 2019 at the age of 81 from natural causes, dying in his sleep in New York City, the very metropolis he helped mythologize on screen. Fun fact: Goldsmith was one of the few actors who understood the business side of show business better than the producers, as he actually worked as a production manager on several films before stepping in front of the camera, giving him a unique cynicism that he brought to his judicial role. Goldsmith represented the weary cynicism of the bench, but our next judge brought a stern, grandfatherly authority that seemed immortal. He was a man who lived to see the industry change, completely surviving nearly a century before taking his final bow. Ben Hammer banged the gavel in 1991 as Judge Herman Mooney when he was 67 years old, a towering presence of justice whose long life was a testament to endurance, even as he watched the golden age of television turn into a digital landscape he barely recognized. Hammer was a staple of the New York acting scene, a man who had been working since the days of live television dramas. For his recurring role as the no-nonsense Judge Mooney, he commanded the standard recurring guest fee of roughly $3,500 per episode, a respectable blue-collar wage for a man who looked like he owned the courthouse. Despite his authoritative demeanor, Hammer was a working actor who never achieved massive wealth, retiring with an estate estimated at $1.5 million. His tragedy was simply the relentless march of time. He outlived almost all his contemporaries, witnessing the death of his friends and the transformation of his city. He died on September 18, 2017 at the staggering age of 92 from heart failure. A quiet conclusion to a life spent bringing order to chaotic scripts. Fun fact, Hammer is immortalized in pop culture not just as a judge on Law & Order, but as the dean of the university in the original Ghostbusters, who fires the main characters, inadvertently launching their entire ghost-catching business. Hammer spoke with authority, but our next judge famously said almost nothing. He was a unique fixture of the show who spent years as a silent background player, hiding a real-life career that was far more controversial and louder than his on-screen persona. Larry Sherman sat silently on the bench in 1994 as Judge Colin Fraser when he was 71 years old, the mute magistrate who became a fan favorite for his glaring silence, masking a real-life identity as a spin doctor for one of the most polarizing figures in American history. Sherman began his tenure on Law & Order as a background extra, paid the pitiful non-speaking rate of roughly $100 a day to simply sit and look stern. It took years before he was finally given a name and a few lines, a slow climb up the ladder that belied his actual influence. In a bizarre twist of reality, Sherman was Donald Trump's publicist in the 1980s, the man famously on the other end of the phone during the John Miller tapes controversy. He died on August 26, 2017 at the age of 94 from natural causes, leaving behind a legacy that was equal parts legal fiction and tabloid reality. His net worth was unverified, but estimated around $5 million due to his PR work far exceeding his acting pay. Fun fact, Sherman played a judge on the show for so long without speaking that the writers eventually gave him a line just to win a bet, creating one of the longest slow burns for a character in TV history. Sherman was the silent observer, but our next judge was a man of vocal fire. He brought a diverse, intense energy to the court, hiding a struggle against typecasting that defined his entire career until his heart suddenly gave out. Sean Elliott presided over the courtroom in 1992 as Judge Joseph Rivera when he was 55 years old, a Puerto Rican powerhouse whose commanding voice filled the room while he fought a lifelong battle to be seen as more than just an ethnic stereotype in a whitewashed industry. Elliott was a celebrated singer and actor. An original cast member of Jacques Brel is alive and well and living in Paris, yet on television, he was often relegated to background authority figures. For his role as Judge Rivera, he earned the standard guest scale of approximately $4,000 per week, a fraction of what his vocal talents were worth on the Broadway stage. He built a modest life with his wife, Tony winner Donna Murphy, accumulating a net worth of $2 million. However, his life was cut short by the fragility of the human heart. He died on March 11, 2016 at the age of 79 from complications of heart failure, passing away in the city where he had fought so hard to be heard. Fun fact, Elliott was also a disco pioneer in the 1970s, recording the hit track Shame and Scandal in the Family, a funky, scandalous song that is a complete tonal opposite to the stern judge he played on TV. Elliott brought rhythm and soul to the bench, but our next subject was the ultimate journeyman. He was an actor whose face you have seen 1,000 times, a man who worked until his mind began to erase the very lines he was paid to memorize. Robert Hogan looked over his glasses in 1991 as Judge Hugo Bright when he was 58 years old. The face of the American character actor, a man who appeared in over 100 shows, but whose final years were stolen by a cruel thief that robbed him of his memories. Hogan was the actor directors called when they needed reliability. He was never the star, but he was always there. For his recurring judicial duties, he was paid the standard industry guest rate of around $3,500 to $5,000 a working wage that he relied on to support his family. He accumulated a net worth of $3 million through sheer volume of work, appearing in everything from The Twilight Zone to The Wire. But the tragedy of Robert Hogan was the slow fade of vascular dementia. Diagnosed in 2013, he spent his last years watching his prolific career vanish from his own mind. He died on May 27, 2021 at the age of 87 due to complications from pneumonia, a quiet end for a man whose name inspired the title of the classic sitcom Hogan's Heroes. Fun fact, the creator of Hogan's Heroes, Bernard Fine, was a close friend of Robert and named the show's lead character after him as a tribute to his struggle to find steady work in the 60s. Hogan faded into the fog of dementia, but our final subject for this session was a man of razor-sharp focus. He left the bench to return to the defense table, playing a lawyer whose intensity on screen was matched only by the silent sugar-coated poison destroying his body from the inside. Jerry Becker approached the jury in 1994 as defense attorney Gerard Wills when he was 43 years old. A method actor of frightening intensity who defended the indefensible on screen, unaware that his own body was prosecuting him with a chronic silent killer. Becker was a stage titan known for his role in the original production of Song of Singapore. But on Law & Order, he was the lawyer you loved to hate. His pay was standard scale for a recurring player, roughly $4,000 per episode, a paycheck that kept him working constantly in New York. Despite his robust, energetic performances, Becker was battling type 1 diabetes, a relentless disease that slowly compromised his organs over decades. He passed away on April 13, 2019, at the age of 68, taken far too soon by complications from the disease. He died just as he was enjoying a late career resurgence, leaving behind a legacy of uncompromising performances. Fun fact, Becker was so convincing as a lawyer that during a break in filming on the streets of New York, a pedestrian actually tried to hire him for a legal case, and Becker stayed in character to politely decline the offer. Becker battled a slow chronic killer, but our next defense attorney faced a sudden silent executioner. He was a soap opera veteran and a familiar face to millions whose career was abruptly adjourned by a heart that stopped beating without a single warning. Tom O'Rourke stood before the bench in 1996 as defense attorney Peter Behrens when he was 52 years old, a polished soap opera veteran who navigated the legal sharks of New York only to be struck down by a sudden biological betrayal just as he was preparing for his final act. O'Rourke was a familiar face to millions as Justin Marler on Guiding Light, bringing a smoothness to Law & Order that contrasted with the show's grit. For his recurring legal appearances, he earned the standard industry guest rate of approximately $5,000 per episode, a respectable wage for a working actor that helped him build a net worth of $2 million. However, the tragedy of Tom O'Rourke was the abrupt silence that ended his song. He was a man of immense vitality, but on September 13, 2009, he suffered a sudden massive heart failure at the age of 65. There was no long battle, no final goodbye. The curtain simply dropped. He died just days before he was set to begin a new theater production, leaving his fellow cast members staring at an empty stage where his charisma should have been. Fun fact, O'Rourke was not just an actor, but a master carpenter who built his own furniture, a grounding hobby that kept him sane in the chaotic world of daytime television and primetime procedurals. It's bittersweet looking back at the cast of Law & Order. Though time has passed and some stars have left us, their legacy remains timeless on screen. Which story shocked or touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to help us keep these memories alive. Thanks for watching.